Thank you both so much for joining. I have a few questions, but I'm really going to try to save time for you guys to jump in and ask questions at the end, so keep that in mind. Okay, so we've heard two sides already this morning. We've heard a very optimistic story from Doris, and we've heard some concerning sentiments, which aren't too different from what we hear every day. Tell me, how do these two different realities play out in what you've seen going around the country, Jim?
First, it's a great honor to be here. As Lisa knows, I was the MC of the very first Zeitgeist back when it started, so it's great to come back home this way. There's so much I'd love to respond to in the stimulating events this morning. Let me make one essential point, if I can. Deb and I have been traveling all over the country since the middle of 2013. We've been in dozens of cities of every sort of economic and racial and other characterization. We've seen a lot. And there's been all sorts of incidental surprises. For example, the incidental surprise of talent dispersal. How many people we find who had careers in San Francisco or New York or Miami, but decided that Des Moines or Greenville or Stockton was a better opportunity for them. We've had the surprise of seeing public-private partnerships, which are sound ridiculous in DC, actually work on the ground level. We've had the surprise of seeing, you saw in this clip, the wind turbine economy coming through Kansas and the way that farmers were having this green energy revolution that I think you heard about before. But the main surprise, the main point I think we want to get across is the contrast between the national level division, hatred, tribalism, polarization, impossibility, fury, all the things that you heard accurately described in the past panel, that on the one hand, and the other reality of Americans in the rest of their lives, that if you don't ask them about national politics, ask them about their communities, their companies, their families, their possibilities, you get something more recognizable, the kind of country that can work together, where people can have fact-based discussions, where they can reinvent institutions. So we think the struggle for the next stage of the country's life is between this national level poison and the local level possibility renewal, and that is, to us, that's the main message.
Yeah, great. And I know, Deb, you were a little surprised by some of the reinvention you saw, but could you just share with everyone one of your favorite stories?
So when we went into all of the towns we visited, we asked people to direct us to a school or two that might be interesting, and it never failed. We were always amazed by the creativity, the experimentation, the imagination that was going on in the local schools, and I want to tell you about one. Anybody here been to Greenville, South Carolina? It's a fabulous town, and it's a town where, well, it's an old textile mill town, and now it's a town of big industry, BMW, Michelin, GE. The parents in the school and the school district were worried about the kids getting a good quality of education. The industry there was worried about the kids being trained and having a strong employment base when they were ready to go to the work. So those two groups got together and they decided that they would change what was going on in the schools, and they aimed at the youngest kids in the poorest part of town, and together they built the A.J. Wittenberg Elementary School of Engineering. Yes, engineering. It was a STEM school where the first graders learned about flight, and then they walked the Swamp Rabbit Trail over to the Peace Center for Performing Arts and watch Peter Pan, watch Peter and Wendy and James take off into the air. The volunteers from GE, who are about the age of the kids' dads in the 4th grade, come and teach them about electricity and how light bulbs work. And at the end of the 4th grade, the town felt these kids nailed it. They were so good after going from pre-K to grade 4 in the STEM topics that they would move on to the middle school. So they created the Finney Fisher Middle School STEAM school. They put the A in and are teaching these kids the arts, how to collaborate, how to cooperate, how to work together, and how to speak, like those kids that you saw in the Parkland slide did. So that's just an example of what's going on locally in the schools we saw.
Awesome. I'm interested, Jim, we have a very sophisticated audience here, and they've heard about everything from how technology transforms to economic dislocation, and what's something that would surprise this group about what's actually working?
you know, every day we were on the road, we had an experience similar to when we were living in China of you won't believe what we saw this day. And that's what we would talk about in our Motel 6 dining room each night when we traveled around. And I think one important surprise involves something that everybody here is involved in, which is technology and its effects through American history. I agree with Doris's perspective on this. There's always been economic dislocation. There's always been people looking for new opportunities. We know that is the political driver of many, many problems these days. You would be surprised by how hard people in northern Mississippi or northeastern Mississippi with the East Mississippi Community College are trying to match families who've never been part of sort of the normal economy with new manufacturing jobs that are emerging there. Or a high school on the coast of Georgia, near St. Mary's, Georgia, where every student ends up with a normal academic degree, lots on AP tracks, but one of 5 career certificates, every single one comes out of there, whether it's in welding or car maintenance or healthcare or things which give people whose parents might have worked in factories, those factories no longer exist, jobs, opportunities for the new economy, like what you showed, you know, with your project in Pikeville.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask one more, and then we're going to let you guys come to the mics. Deb, I know you have a favorite institution, something that really surprised you, but also became very close to your heart. Can you tell folks here about that?
Yeah, I'm really pleased to say that I think we've found the center of civility in practice in the country, and this is where those corporate dollars should go. It's the public libraries. We went to public libraries in every town we went to, and I felt that it was a reflection of the heart and soul of the communities. It was the place that filled in the gaps, and where the staff were dedicated to raising up the entire communities where they needed it. They started in education. In Winters, California, the Friends of the Library were out on the sidewalks stroller spotting, handing out books, boxes of books, baby caps, and library cards so the moms or dads could bring their kids into the library, start their early education. There are places of civic importance. Erie, Pennsylvania, where 10% of the population is refugees, 10% of the entire population. It's the first stop for the refugees coming to that town as a public library to teach them to feel included in the American spirit, whether it's ESL classes, citizenship classes, and that it's all free, and this is a place where you can come to get help. Also, as important centers for technology, you all know about high tech going on in the libraries, maker spaces, space for people doing startups, and incidentally, the librarians love that because they say when these guys are successful, they sell their companies to Google. We want them to know where they started. Remember, they started in the public library. Something you may not know as familiarly as the low end of what goes on in tech and libraries. In Columbus, Ohio, you walk in, you see the banks of computers. We all know 25% of homes don't have fast Wi-Fi or even sometimes computers. Job seeking is one of the biggest things that goes on there. There was a young man who walked into the library in Columbus, Ohio, asking the librarian for some help in finding a job. They drew up some possibilities on the computer. She said, here's the application, you fill it in, I'll come back 10 minutes later, we'll see how you did, we'll talk about it. She did that, she came back and found he had filled in the application on the computer with a marking pen on the screen. That's the low level of technology that's so necessary and addressed in libraries.
I had to ask about libraries. It's also been my favorite part of my journey around the country. My favorite of all the things I saw in libraries is the work Robin Johnston is doing in Memphis. She has a bus called JobLink, and it's a 38-foot bus with 10 computer stations, and all she does is go around Memphis helping people look for jobs, practice interviewing, write their resumes. It's truly amazing what America's librarians are doing in their communities. All right, let's pass it to all of you. Who's got a question? Raise your hand, we'll get you a mic.
I'll get things rolling. Good morning.
Morning.
You write so powerfully about the strength of local communities and also the national, just to use a label, dysfunction of political discourse. Given your ability to stride and straddle those two worlds, what are your observations now about how that gap may become bridged?
This is a fundamental question that we think about all the time, and it's where models of history either apply or don't, because we have two different versions of American experience going on right now. One where it just is kill your enemies, and every inch you take from them, is to your gain. And then we have a part of a country where people still can make 20-year plans and they can have reasonable discussion. So we would hope that contradiction is resolved in the way that Doris Kearns Goodman was suggesting 100 years ago, of having this dispersed national renewal movement come together in a kind of new progressivism, saying, yes, we are better than our national politics. It's possible that will not be the case, and that the national politics really is finally broken, as Frank Luntz was saying. In either way, I think it makes sense to concentrate on the possibilities that are evolving around the country, to give them more light, to give them more connection, and to use the spirit of what's called conditional optimism. Not that things will get better, but that they could get better if everyone applies his and her efforts towards that end. So we don't know the outcome of this tension, but we are hoping, and we're connected with people around the country, as you are, who are working in the conditionally optimistic way for a positive resolution of the tension.
All right, we've got time for one or two more. Yeah, right here.
I look at this map, and it's obviously 2013 to 2016. That was Obama America. I think I would be most concerned about how has it changed? Are you still doing this? And what's the difference between America of 2017 versus the past?
So we were, in 2016, I'll say almost every place we went, with the exception, almost every county we went ended up voting for Trump. So we saw sort of the sentiments in these counties. We ended up the reporting just after the 2016 election, when they're writing in 2017, but we're about to hit the road again. And we were in some of these places right after the election where the short version of the reaction was cognitive dissonance. Like in Wyoming, we were the day after the election, second highest proportion for Trump after West Virginia. And the feeling there was, we're so glad Hillary Clinton was beaten, but boy, we hope that NAFTA doesn't get messed up. And we hope the immigration system doesn't get disrupted, because NAFTA and the immigration system are so important to our economy. So to us, this emphasized the tribal, disconnected from real life nature of national politics and the turning on nature of local politics. And we were in West Virginia doing filming. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to answer that question too.
Yeah.
Until about 2016, what we saw were all these efforts where people were applying their passions, whether it was education or the environment or, building Main Street, whatever it was they were doing. And then I would say, just about at the election time, there was just kind of a shock, and then there was a regrouping. And in the last year or so, our inboxes has been flooded. I wish Google could help me more with that. That's my request. Yeah. Please answer my emails from people all around the country, all around. Come to my town. You've got to see what we're doing. Yes, we're doing that here. It feels like the passion has gotten stronger in the same themes, in the same zones where it was before. And I think it's because, locally in a small place with what you do, and where you're accountable to your neighbors, you feel like you can have an impact. You feel like you can have a difference. So whatever they're doing in our hometown of Washington, D.C., okay, they do what, or don't do what they don't do. But out here, I'm gonna make something happen, and it really feels like that has grown. So there.
All right, we're almost out of time. Is there anything else, Jim, that you would like to add before we close?
You want me to do this, or so I guess this is actually a segue, an elegant segue to the next session you're about to hear, which is, I think everybody in this room knows, as we do, the problems around the country, from opioids to dislocation to police violence. What most people don't know is this other effort that is coming up from the grassroots. You're about to hear from somebody who is doing that. And we think that is the effort for the greater good. We're hoping more light can be shed on and more connections can be drawn between.
Great. Jim and Deb, thank you so much.
Thank you.